Resourceful Designer, episode 67, a proven strategy for getting design referrals.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. Chocolate was always his go-to flavor, but now he prefers vanilla. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today as we discuss running our graphic design businesses. Now, I have a great topic to share with you today, and it's a proven strategy for getting design referrals. And I say it's a proven strategy because it's what's working for me right now. It's the strategy that I'm using, and I'm getting a ton of referrals, and I want to share it with you. But before I get to that, I want to bring back the topic of print brokering. Now, if you haven't listened to it already, episode 49, Print Brokering to Supplement Your Graphic Design Business. In that episode, I discussed how I don't only do graphic design, but I also help the client out by dealing with the printers. I get the files ready, I send them off to the printers, and I deal with them. So I do some print brokering on behalf of the clients, or I do it for myself as a service to my clients. And in that process, I end up making a commission on the printing. I have some deals that I've arranged with my local printers, or if I'm using online printers, I can mark up the stuff, and I supplement my income through print brokering. So if you're interested in more on that, go back and look up episode 49. And just a reminder that any and all links that I mention in this episode can be found by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 67. That's this episode. I will include all the links to anything I mentioned in this episode there in case you forget. Now, the reason I wanted to bring up print brokering is because of something that happened this morning. This morning when I sat down to work, I had an email in my inbox. And the email was from a client that I do work on a regular basis, but they sent me an email saying, Mark, do you remember those doctor referral forms we did a few years ago? We need to reorder. Same quantity as last time with the exact same specs, no changes. So I looked it up. The last time we did this order was in 2012. I looked up the specs, looked up the printer that I had used, and I sent an email off to the printer saying, here's a job that you did for me in 2012. Here are the files in case you need them again, in case you don't have them anymore. Please go ahead and print the job with this quantity. And I gave them the specs. I told them it was the exact same specs as the last time the job was printed, but here are the new specs again. And when the job is completed, please invoice me and deliver them to, and I gave them the address of the client. And all of that, including reading the email that I initially got and composing the email to the printer, probably took me less than 2 minutes to do. And that's it. I'm done with that. And yet I'm going to collect a commission of I'd say about $120, which will be my commission on this print job. So that just goes to show you the power of print brokering. I took 2 minutes out of my morning this morning to read an email and then send another email off, and I'm going to make a nice profit off of it. So if you're not already using print brokering as part of your business, I highly suggest you look into it. It's a great way to supplement your income. Now, as always, I want to share a resource or tip with you. And this week, it is a tip. And the tip is to review your email signature. Whenever you're sending an email, you should have a signature. All programs, whether you're using Mail on a Mac or you're using Outlook or even Google Mail, you have the ability to create pre-made signatures that would automatically be added to the bottom of your email. Well, in your email signature, most people include, their name, their title, their contact information, phone, email, even though it's being sent in an email. Some people include their email, their website, maybe Twitter, Facebook, and such. But the tip I'm sharing with you today is in your email signature, tell people what you do. Way back at the beginning of Resourceful Designer, episode 2, in fact, was titled, Do Your Clients Know What You Do? And in that episode, I discussed how some clients hire you for a certain job. They hire you to design a logo. They hire you to design their stationery. They hire you to design a trade show booth. They hire you to design a website. But they don't realize that you're capable of doing all the other things. Case in point, I did some podcast artwork for a lady a couple of months ago. Well, just recently, or just this past week, she contacted me to ask if I knew anybody that can do her website for her. And I said, well, I do websites as well. And she says, oh, I didn't know you did that. I thought you were a graphic designer and I needed a web designer. They didn't realize that I did both. And that's not the first time that's happened to me. So one way to combat this problem is to include in your email signature a short line or a couple of bullet points just explaining graphic design, logo design, branding, website design, whatever. Maybe you make it as opposed to bullet points, you make it a sentence. Providing all graphic design services from logo design to full-on branding to websites and trade show booths or whatever. Whatever way you do it, just include something in your email signature that'll let your clients know what services you have. And even if it pays off for one client, it's worth the time to include it. And once you put it in your signature, it's there. It's not like you have to type it up every time. It's included in your signature. And if it means one client comes back to you for something because they saw it in the signature and didn't realize that you did that service, it'll be well worth it. So that's this week's tip of the week. Update your email signature to include the services that you offer. And now, a proven strategy for getting design referrals. We're graphic designers. We have the know-how. We have the creative ability to promote our businesses like no other businesses can. I mean, we can tweak our websites to get the absolute most out of them. We can go out and network until the cows come home, whatever that means. And yet, even with all our ability and all our know-how to promote ourselves and to get business on our own, nothing feels better than getting a call from someone who's looking for a designer and hearing from that person that you were referred to them by one of your satisfied clients. Think about that. A satisfied client. Doesn't that feel great? Now, I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I can almost guarantee you that when it comes to freelancers and home-based designers, when it comes to us getting new work, referrals are probably the number one way by far. I mean, I just have to look at myself as an example. I've been running a successful graphic design business for 12 years now, and yet I've never had a website, nor have I ever advertised my business. I've never been in the yellow pages. I don't put banner ads on sites. I don't put anything in the newspapers or online or anywhere. In fact, I did have one ad that appeared in a dance recital program after the dance instructor. I designed a t-shirt for their dance studio, and she insisted on putting an ad for free in her recital program that maybe 40 parents saw. That was the only time in my 12-year history that I've ever advertised my business. And yet, my business is thriving. And almost all of it comes from referrals. Yes, there are times that I go out and I find business on my own, but most of it, almost 90% of it, comes from referrals. Now, before I go any further, I just want to do an aside. And I mentioned how I don't have a website and I haven't had one for 12 years. Please don't do as I do. Do as I say. Build yourself a website. If you don't have one already, you really, really should have one. I really, really should have one. It's just one of those things that I just never got around to doing. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've never found the need to it because my business was doing well enough without. And it's still doing well enough without, but I still want to create a website. So don't do as I do as I say, and make sure you have a website. But as I said, my business, I would say 80, if not 90% of my business comes from referrals. Now, yes, I had built up a really, really good name for myself as a graphic designer while working for 15 years at the print shop that I worked at previously. So when I left there and I started on my own, a lot of people around my area knew who I was, knew what I was capable of, and they sought me out. But that only explains the business I've gotten locally. It doesn't explain how I've gotten work from people all across Canada, across the United States, in Australia, Ireland, the United Kingdoms, Africa, Hong Kong. And I'm sure there's some places that I'm forgetting that I've worked with clients over the years, but all of those clients were acquired through referrals. Now, let's look at your situation. Maybe you've been in business for several years like I have and have an established client base. Or maybe you're just starting your graphic design business. You've finally chosen the perfect name for it. Maybe after listening to episode 41, naming your graphic design business. And with that name, you've designed all your logo and your marketing material and everything you need to help promote your business, including a stunning website with a great about page, like the one I talk about in episode 52. You've even figured out what your pricing strategy will be with the help of episode 11, Pricing Strategies for Your Graphic Design Business, which I must say is my most popular episode. And with all that done, you go out into the world, Or more likely, you go out into your local area and you land yourself those first few elusive clients. And that is great. It's a wonderful feeling. But today I'm not talking about landing those first few clients or landing new clients. That's a whole other podcast episode. What I'm talking to you today is when you already have those clients, how to get them to refer you. Is there a way that you can improve your chances for clients to refer you to others? Now, there are probably lots of strategies out there, and I'm not going to cover everything. In fact, I'm only going to talk about one strategy today, and it's a strategy that I've been using recently to get design referrals with great success. Now, first off, I'm going to say this really works well if you have a niche that you're focusing on. Now, I talked in episode 54, Should You Find a Graphic Design Niche, about the power of niches or niches, depending on how you want to say it, the power of niches for graphic design, and how if you focus on one area, on one niche, then you could become the expert, the go-to person, where people would want to go to you over another designer just because they view you as the expert in that niche. So as I said, this strategy works very well in a niche. I think it can work well outside if you're not in a particular niche, but in my case, this is how I focused it. Now, when I say this works well in a niche is something that you should focus on, but you have to know something about that niche. You can't just say, today I'm going to focus on the acupuncture niche. I've never had it done. I don't know a thing about it, but that's the niche I'm going to focus on. That's not really going to help you. You have to know something about the niche. So whether it's something that's a hobby of yours or an interest or a group or a community you belong to, something that you are familiar with and that you can talk about and that you know. In my case, I'm talking about podcasting. Over the last couple of years, since I started podcasting, I've been slowly building up my name in the podcasting space to the point where I'm getting more and more known in this particular niche of podcasting as the go-to graphic designer or as a go-to graphic designer. I'm not the only graphic designer in the podcasting niche, but my name is being passed around and it's being referred by people. So here's the strategy that I used. First of all, whenever you get into one of these niches, as I said, whether it's a hobby group, an interest, a club, whatever, make friends, help people out whenever you can. That's how I got started. I got started not because I wanted to be a designer for the podcast industry. I got involved because I was interested in podcasting. When I joined all sorts of podcasting Facebook groups and other online forums and stuff, and I would partake and answer questions and help people. But whenever anybody would come up with a website question, a artwork question, a logo question, I would try to pipe in and give them my best advice. I would not go in if somebody was saying, I'm having problems and I need somebody to help me with something. Yes, I might go in and offer my services, but I'm not going to go in and just help them out of the blue. But most of the time it would be, I'm having trouble doing something with my website, and then I would offer them some suggestions or a route that they can take. Or sometimes somebody would present a podcast artwork that they had designed. Maybe they had it done on, who knows, Fiverr or 99 Designs, which I'm not a fan of, but sometimes they get these things and they'll show them and say, here are 2 or 3 different designs. What do you guys think? And being a graphic designer, I will go in and I would say, I'm a graphic designer and this is what I think of these designs. And I don't shoot them down. I won't go in and say, oh, they're terrible, or, oh, you shouldn't be using Fiverr, you shouldn't be using 99 Designs for design and all that. Even though that I might feel that way, I'm going to go in and give them an honest opinion. This is what I like about them. This is what I don't like. This is what I think works. This is what I think doesn't work. I will say which one I like better. If you're going to choose, this is the one I would choose and why I would choose it. I offer help and advice. And if none of them are good and there's nothing good I can say, I just leave it blank. I don't bother answering. But by doing this, I'm trying to make friends and trying to get known out there. Whenever people ask an art question or a web question, I would answer. And after a while, people start recognizing the people that answer over and over. And that's a great thing about a niche like this, like podcasting or any other niche, whatever it can be. The people inside that tend to help out and are very supportive of other people's within the niche. So when one person hears of somebody helping one person and they hear of somebody else that has a similar problem, they might refer that other person to help them, and your name gets passed around. And what happens is, by helping these people, by answering questions and being accessible, it creates a kind of social proof. And what that means is it establishes you as an expert in your field. And the people will start to recognize you as such. Even if you don't count yourself an expert, you don't think you're an expert, even if you're a brand new graphic designer and you don't think like, I don't have years of experience behind me, I'm brand new to this. Just by going in and answering questions, solving problems, and helping people, you will be deemed as an expert in your field, because even if you're a brand new graphic designer, you know stuff that people that are not graphic designers don't know, which in turn makes you an expert in their eyes. And whenever they end up or they know somebody that requires someone with your skills, there's a good chance that they will turn to you. So when I got into podcasting, as I said, it wasn't my intention to go in there and say, I want to be a graphic designer for podcasting. In fact, I never even thought about doing that. I just went in and started helping people, and my name got out. And this was even before I started Resourceful Designer, which people now know I'm a graphic design podcaster. Before, people knew me as a TV podcaster because I have a podcast network where I talk about TV shows. That has nothing to do with graphic design. That was how people were introduced to me. In fact, until last year, when people asked me what I podcast about, that was the first thing I would say. Now, obviously, Resourceful Designer is my main podcast. But until then, I would say that I'm a TV fan podcaster. But my name got out in that niche. And the same thing you can do, whatever your niche is. If you're into motorcycles and you're in some groups or some Facebook forums talking about motorcycles, I'm not telling you to talk about motorcycles, but focus on the design. If somebody in the motorcycle niche is saying, we're doing a special charity run, we're doing a poker run type thing. I don't know if you understand what that is. I know around here they'll do stuff where you have to drive different places and you get these playing cards, and at the end, whoever has the best poker hand wins or something like that. But they would want to promote this, and they'll want posters, and maybe they want t-shirts designed for everybody involved. Well, if somebody in the motorcycle niche, they go into a motorcycle group, say on Facebook or on Reddit or whatever, and they start asking around, and they say, well, they need a graphic designer. And all of a sudden they find out that there's a motorcycle enthusiast who's also a graphic designer. Well, are they going to go to a regular graphic designer, or are they going to go to the motorcycle enthusiast? And the same thing can apply to whether you do stamp collecting, basket weaving, bungee jumping, whatever your passion, whatever your hobby is, become the graphic designer for that space. Now, as I said, I didn't go into the podcast niche with the anticipation of becoming the graphic designer. But I'll tell you what happened. And when I say this is a proven strategy to attract design referrals, I stumbled upon this, but it's been working so well that I wanted to share it with you. And here was how it actually started off. I offered something at no charge. And this is exactly what you should do. No, I'm not saying you should go out and work for free. In fact, I'm saying completely the opposite. If somebody contacts you in your niche or your space and says, hey, I need something done, can you do it for free? Run away from them. I mean, unless there's a very valid reason why you should work for free, then don't do it. And if you're wondering what a valid reason is, back a few episodes ago, my resource of the week was a website I shared, which is titled freefeeflee.ca. Will help you decide if it's worth doing for free, if you should charge a fee, even a discounted fee, or just flee and not do the job at all. But again, I'm not saying you should do work for free when somebody asks. What I'm saying is offer something for free to people who didn't ask. And that's how I got started. Now, let me explain. We're graphic designers. We're constantly learning new things. We're expanding our skills. We're learning new design styles. We're exploring our creativity. We're testing out new tools and instruments we get. We do this in order to better ourselves. We have to if we want to strive in this business. Well, the thing is whenever you are testing out these new techniques, looking through a tutorial, trying out some new Photoshop plugins or actions or anything, whenever you're testing these or trying these out, instead of just fooling around with them, why don't you design something for someone who really needs it and offer it to them free with no obligation for them to use it? Say you're really into knitting and you're in this knitting group and with a whole bunch of people that are into knitting, and there's a bunch of people that have websites, and you go to these websites because you enjoy knitting, you enjoy looking at the different patterns and things. And you know that this one website you really like, their logo is really, really horrible. You can tell that it was done, I don't know by who, but it's just horrible. So maybe one day you are fooling around with Photoshop. You notice some new, you just got some new plugins or something, or some new brushes, and you're playing around with stuff. Instead of just randomly doing something, why don't you take that knitting website name and create a logo for it using those things? So you are expanding your skill, your ability, you're learning things. And then in the process, you create something that somebody might be able to use. And then what you do is you approach the website and you say, listen, I'm a graphic designer. I was testing out some skills. I was trying some things out, and I decided to use your website as a guinea pig for me. And here's what I come up with. And it's of no use to me. So here, you can have it. You can do whatever you want with it. If you want to replace your logo, if you want to use it, so be it. Or if you want to just delete it, that's fine. I just have no use for it, and I thought I'd give it to you. Now, don't go and tell them that their current design is bad, even if it is. As I said, simply tell them that you were trying out a new technique and you decided to use their brand as I mentioned, as the guinea pig. And since it's no good to you, they might as well have it. And that's how I started off. You know that voice that you hear every week at the beginning of the podcast? Well, that's my buddy Wayne. And Wayne is a voiceover artist. And I hired him to do the intro to Resourceful Designer. So every week you hear him introduce me. Well, Wayne had a podcast called Voiceover Journey, which he was putting out. He's not putting it out anymore, but it was a podcast he was doing for a couple of years. And one day I had bought a bundle of, it was one of those design bundles that came with a whole bunch of stuff, including some fonts. And one of the fonts that it came with it was one of those open type fonts where every character had alternates to it, and not just one, but it had multiple. So the letter Y might have had 6 or 7 different tails that you could put onto the Y. A short tail, a little curly one, some that went down and like big long tails onto them that would underline the word, and all sorts of different things. And every letter had multiple alternates. So I was fooling around trying all these different things. Like, okay, what does it look like if you do a word that has the Y that underlines the entire rest of the word, and so forth. And in the process, as I was fooling around, I knew in the back of my mind that Wayne had this podcast, Voiceover Journey. So I just decided to use that as the text that I was fooling around with. And I started seeing, how can I get creative with Voiceover Journey, with that wording? And I played around until I had something I liked. I felt comfortable with the font. I learned what I wanted to learn about the font. And then I had this logo type created. So I went a little bit further and I looked at his podcast artwork and I saw what it looked like. And I said, well, why don't I find something that's similar, but now using what I had done? And I quickly put something together for him. And when I was done, I presented it to Wayne. I said, here, Wayne, I was fooling around, which was the truth. I was fooling around with a new font that I just got. I wanted to see, because I'd never had one of these fonts that had so many different variations. I was fooling around with it. And I came up, I created this thing. Here you go. If you want to use it, great. If not, I don't care. I didn't want to charge him or anything like that. And I sent it to him. And it wasn't because his original artwork was bad, although in all honesty, it was. And I'm sorry, Wayne. I know I said earlier you shouldn't tell the person. I have a feeling Wayne listens to these episodes. So sorry, Wayne, but your original artwork was pretty bad. I know Wayne can take it. But I gave him that artwork, and with no obligation. It was up to him. Now, he did decide to use it. Now, several months later, I did something similar with another podcast. Now, this was a podcast called Packers Fan Podcast, which is a podcast dedicated to the Green Bay Packers, which are a football team. And I'm talking football as in American football, not football soccer. So just in case you didn't know the difference. But not that there was a bad artwork for it. It's just I came across something and I was fooling around with the artwork and I wanted to try some stuff in Photoshop. And in the process, I said, well, as I'm trying this, why don't I see what I can come up with? So I ended up creating artwork. And it's not like it took me hours and hours. I was just fooling around and I came up with something. And then I sent it over to the guys at the Packers Fan Podcast, which in all honesty, Wayne, the guy I was just talking about, is also on that one as well. But he has Troy is his partner over there on that podcast. And I sent it to them and they love that. And they started using that. So in the process, I gave them something that they were very happy to receive. And I ended up learning because it's not just something I went out of my way and said, oh, they need a new podcast artwork. Let me design something for them. That was not my intention. My intention was to learn something on my own. In the first case, it was to learn a font. And in the second one, it was some tutorial I had seen about Photoshop. And I was, instead of following along with the tutorial, what they were showing, I decided to do some different artwork as I was following the tutorial. And I ended up creating the Packers Fan podcast artwork. And I offered it to both of them because, I mean, what am I going to do with this stuff afterwards? But here's the payback. In both cases, Wayne and Troy for the Packers Fan podcast were very happy and thrilled with what they had got. So what did they do? They started talking about it. They started sharing with people that this great artwork. Wow, look at the great artwork we got, the Mark designed for us. And what this ended up doing is, first of all, it exposed me for the first time to the podcast community that, hey, this guy, Mark, yeah, we might have heard he's a graphic designer, but look at the artwork he can do. And the second thing it did is anytime that Wayne or Troy heard about somebody who needed artwork, who are they going to refer? They might know a lot of designers as far as I know, but who's the designer that just gave them some free artwork without them asking for it? Well, guess who they referred? And the process started reciprocating. So they started sharing my name around. And next thing you know, I was picking up little bits of work here or there. And then next thing you know, I got a website and then another website and then more artwork. And next thing you know, I'm doing a lot of podcast stuff and word is being spread. And the funny thing about it is sometimes I will get a job. Somebody will contact me and say, Mark, I need some artwork done or I need a website done. And you were referred to me by so-and-so. And I just stop and I think, I says, I have no idea who that is that referred you to me. I've never done any work for them. I've never heard of them before. I don't know why they're referring me, but the reason is they've heard my name, either that I've been helpful in one of the Facebook groups or one of the other online groups, or they heard my name from somebody that I had done some great work for. And now they're passing on my name because, again, podcasters, just like any other niche, like to help within. When somebody knows of, like somebody contacts them and says, I need a graphic designer, they may know a graphic designer that's not into podcasting. But if it's a podcaster that needs it, or if a website specifically, they're going to say, well, Mark does podcasting websites. And there's some skills involved there that a regular website doesn't have. There's stuff with RSS feeds and setting up the podcasts and all that. Well, doesn't it make sense for them to go to somebody who understands that niche, understands that circle, and it has the skills for what they need? Yes, it does. So that's how these referrals are working. Now, in order for these to work, there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind. First of all, you have to be able to do good work. I mean, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? If your work isn't good and you start doing this, like if I would have given something to Wayne to begin with and it wasn't very good, Wayne, first of all, wouldn't have used it and he wouldn't start recommending me to people. Same thing when I did the other one for Troy and the Packers Fan podcast. If it wasn't good and they didn't think it was good enough, they wouldn't be spreading the word around. So make sure your work is good enough. You're not just doing something, oh, I'm testing something out. Oh, this is fun. Oh, okay, crappy. And I learned what I had to learn and here, give it to them. No, make sure that if you're going to give it to somebody, that it represents your skill as a designer and that is good enough to be shown to the world. Now, the second thing is this doesn't really work unless you actually have a relationship with the people. Whether you're in a relationship directly with the people you're going to offer things to, or in general in the niche or the area that you're targeting. Now, back in episode 20, I talked about building relationships with your graphic design clients. Well, those same skills about building relationships with your clients work with building relationships with people in the space that you're targeting. And as I said, I didn't just pick Wayne out of the blue. I didn't just go through iTunes, pick a random podcast to do some artwork about. I already had a relationship with Wayne. In fact, Wayne and I both did separate podcasts about the TV show Under the Dome. In fact, you could say we were competing podcasts. We were two different podcasts for the same TV show competing against each other. But in the podcast space, I've noticed that there's not a lot of competition like this. We actually would encourage and help each other out. And that's the great thing about a niche. There's not a lot of competition when it comes to people that have the same hobby or the same interests. I mean, even graphic designers. There are a whole bunch of graphic designers in my area, and we all get along, we all share, we all talk. And even though they are my competition, I don't view them as competition. I've got to beat them. I view them as fellow designers. just like I view you as fellow designers. I mentioned earlier that I do business in Australia, Hong Kong, Ireland, all over the place. And some of you might be in those areas. But I don't view you as competition, and I hope you don't view me as competition. There's plenty of work to go around that we should all be helping each other out, just like I'm trying to help you out. So create these relationships with people in the space that you're targeting, whether it's a niche or an industry or whatever. You create these relationships, because once you build those relationships, then people will be much more willing to refer you. Think about the people in your life that you would refer to others. I'm not talking about designers or clients. I'm just the people that help you out in your life. What do you know about them? Chances are you know more about them than just the service they did for you. I mean, if an electrician comes over to fix something at your house and he just comes in, fixes it, does a great job, and then leaves, but you really don't know the person, you don't talk to him, are you going to refer them? You might, just because maybe they're the only electricians you know, but that would be the only reason you would refer them. If you knew several electricians, would you refer them just because they came over and they did a great job? Maybe. But I tell you what, if you had formed a relationship with that person while he's there, and when I say a relationship, I'm not talking somebody that you're going to go out for drinks with and that. I just mean opening up a repertoire with, talking to the person, getting to know them a little bit. When that happens, you are much more likely to refer them. Well, the same goes for your clients that you do your service for. I think about the service shop at my dealership where I bought my last car. Now, whenever I bring my car in there, it's under warranty. So I bring it to the dealership to get serviced. And every time I go in there, they do a great job. But the problem is every time I go in, it's somebody different that serves me. I don't know who these people are. And I never see the person who's actually working on my car. So if somebody asks me, says, I need a good mechanic or somebody to service my car, who do you recommend? Unless you bought your car at the same dealership that I did, I'm not really going to recommend them to you, because yes, they do a good job whenever they work on my car, but I don't know them. I don't really have a relationship with them other than the fact that that's where I bring my car. On the other hand, before I bought my car that has a warranty, I used to go to this guy called Randy. He's a great mechanic. He has one of those greasy garages downtown. It's not one of these beautiful dealership or box store type garages. It's an old, rundown, greasy building that he runs his shop out of. And Randy is, in my opinion, the best mechanic in the world, if not this local area. And the reason I think that is because of the relationship that Randy and I have formed over the years when he used to service my older cars. It wasn't just a matter of bringing the car there and getting it repaired. Randy would talk to me. He would get to know me. He knew about my family and my wife and my kids. And he knew about my car. He knew about my needs for the car. And he remembered things. When I would bring my car back for an oil change or something in whatever amount of months later, he would ask me, how was that thing that we fixed? Or, you had that hum or that wobble or that did anything? He remembered things. And I appreciated him for that and his knowledge. And as I said, we created a kind of relationship, not the kind of relationship that I would go out for a dinner with him or anything like that. Although I wouldn't be opposed to it if he wanted to. I'd go out for a guy's night. But the type of relationship where I felt comfortable bringing my car, telling him whatever, and I knew that he wouldn't take advantage of me. And that's why, even though it's been years since I've been into him or Randy has serviced one of my cars, he's still the first person I would refer to anybody local who's looking for a mechanic. And that's because of the relationships. So do good work and build relationships. And the relationships don't have to be with actual clients. As I said, go into these groups and talk to people, offer advice, solve problems for them without actually doing anything, and they will appreciate it. And the last thing I want to talk about is when it comes to it, don't be afraid to ask for referrals either. And it's not that hard. I mean, once you finish a project for a client, whether it's in the niche, and this works regardless, whether it's in a certain niche or just any client, once you finish a project for that client and you know that they're satisfied, simply ask them to refer you to anyone else that you think or they think can use your services. Now, you might not be comfortable asking them outright. First of all you're doing is asking somebody to refer you. It's not that big a deal. But if you're really not comfortable, here's something you can do. Set yourself up a reminder for maybe a week or two after you finish the project, or If the project was something that had a date involved, like maybe it was a special presentation that was taking place, or a play, you did a poster for a play, or maybe there was a trade show or a conference, or if there is a special date involved, set a reminder for a week or two after that date. And whenever the time arrives, whether it's a week or two after you deliver the project or a week or two after an event takes place, when the reminder comes up, and I usually set my reminders when I send my invoice, when I'm done the job and I hand stuff over to the clients and then I send the invoice out, then I'll set a reminder for a week or two later. Or if it's an event that's taking place, I look in the calendar and I take a week or two after the event and I set up a reminder. And when that time arrives, send your client an email, either asking them how the event went. Was it a success? Did you get everything out of it that you were hoping? Whatever the event was, ask them about the event. Or if there was no event for the project, simply ask them if they were satisfied with the project. Is it working out the way they were hoping? Now, in your email, while you're asking that, mention that you enjoyed working with them on the project and ask them to contact you when they have more projects for you. Don't say if you have more. Don't say contact me if you have something else you want me to do. Say contact me when you have more projects for you to do. And that'll keep you in mind. And then before finishing off the email, tell them, say something along the lines of, in the meantime, please feel free to refer me to anyone you think could use my services. And then thank them again for letting you work on the project and sign the email. And you send this off. Now, what this accomplishes is first, it puts you fresh in their mind again. If they had some sort of big event and they went to it and now it's 2 weeks later, trust me, they're not thinking about you. You're the last thing in their mind right now. And if it was just a simple project, business cards, a logo, stationery, a flyer, once they have the flyer in hand and they're handing them out, they're not really thinking of you anymore. So by sending them this email, first of all, it puts you fresh in mind with this project now behind them. So they're done this project. As soon as you contact them, they might start thinking, oh, especially when you asked, is there any other project, or keep me in mind when there's a project in the future? They might start thinking, well, that project's done. What's the next thing I'm working on? And maybe there's something right now that they could start brewing and contacting you about. And if that doesn't happen, at least you've put yourself back in their mind for anybody else that they might know that could use your services and they would refer you. So there's no harm in asking people to refer you. And the fact that you're asking will help jog their memory. The next time somebody says something, they might not be asking, but somebody might say, oh, I'm having trouble with my website. And where your client might let that comment pass because they don't know anything about a website, well, now they might pipe up and say, oh, you're having problems? Well, this person that I did some work for me, they're really good. Why don't you give them a call? They might be able to help you. So by asking, you will also get more referrals. So if you do all these things, some amazing things can happen. People will start referring you. And as I mentioned earlier, what's even more amazing is some of those referrals will come from people that you didn't even work with. It's just you've given yourself a name. You've built a name for yourself in that niche, in that group, in that environment, wherever it is, in that circle of people. You've built yourself a name as a trustworthy expert. And when somebody needs the services that you offer, when they need something design related, when they need help with a website, they will be much more likely to contact somebody that they already deem as an expert, somebody who is already familiar with the niche, with the group that they belong to. So as I said, there are many, many different ways to get referrals from clients. And this is just one strategy that I've used, and I'm getting great success. I'm getting tons of work in the podcasting space because I've been very helpful online to those in the podcasting sphere. And I started off just offering my services, or actually I started off by giving away a couple of designs. That's all I did was 2 podcast artworks. And it's kind of spread from there. Word got around and then people started referring me. And the more people know about me, they start following or hearing me. And when they see my name pop up, sometimes all it takes is somebody to say, oh yeah, Mark Decote did this artwork. And all of a sudden that person sees my name pop up with me helping somebody else. Then they all of a sudden think, well, Mark's the go-to guy for design. And the same thing can happen to you in your niche. So if you do this right, and it doesn't happen overnight, it does take time. As I said, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, helping people out and that. And just now it's really paying off. I was doing artwork previously. The things I mentioned to you about the Packers fan podcast and the voiceover journey podcast for Wayne, those were a couple of years ago I did those. And I did get work over time, but now it's to the point where most of my work now is coming in through these podcasting channels. And the same can happen to you if you find the right niche. Now, I didn't go out seeking this niche of podcasting. It kind of found me. And I'm not focusing on it. Back in that episode about finding a graphic design niche, I say that it's okay for you to have a niche, but still do other stuff. I still will design for anybody. I'm still a general graphic designer. But one small part of my business is focused on the podcasting world. And I'm taking advantage of it as much as I can. And the same can happen to you if you focus on whatever niche, hobby, or interest you have and focus your design services there. So that's my current proven strategy for getting design referrals. Now, I would love to know if you have a strategy that you're using to get design referrals. Leave me a comment on the show notes page for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 67. And now this week's question of the week. And this week's question comes in from Sully. Sully's asking a question about working online as a freelancer. He says, I easily get overwhelmed when presented with a job offer, such as designing a logo for a company, mainly because I try to take the professional approach and I don't know where to begin. When is the right time to give a questionnaire? When do I create a mood board? How does a proposal come into play? And how do I submit finished work? I'm still learning to be a good designer. I started working for people sometime in the last year, and I don't feel like I'm taking a professional approach, which might hurt my design work in the future. Any advice from you would be great help to me. Thanks for taking the time to read all of this. Hope you have a wonderful day. Well, thank you for your question, Sully. Now, first thing I want to tell you before I get into all the rest of it is there is no right or wrong way of doing this. There's only the way that works for you. And that way will change over time. I can guarantee that everybody that listens to this podcast does things slightly differently. I do it one way. The next designer will do it a certain way. The next designer will do it a little bit different. And then third designer or fourth designer will do it completely different than the way the rest of us do. And as I said, things will change over time. The way I handle a project now, my process is different today than it was 2 years ago. And it's different than it was 5 years ago. And it's way different than it was 12 years ago when I first started my business. It will evolve as you grow. It will evolve with each project. You will learn stuff and you will learn the mistakes that you make and you will improve them. You will also learn the successes you have and expand on them in order to create the process that works best for you. Now, I know that doesn't help you right now with what you're asking, so I'll go a little bit into my process. And as I said, this is my process. It could be very different than anybody else who's listening to the podcast right now. But what I like to do is, say a client contacts me for a job. I like to have an initial conversation. I want to talk to them on the phone. Sometimes an email is good. Some people don't like conversations. They want to do everything by email or such, but I like to talk to them, or video if I can. But usually phone is good enough. And that'll be for the initial conversation. And what the initial conversation is for me to figure out whether I want to work with this person or not. I'm not talking about the ins and outs of what the project is. I want to get the overall idea of what the project is they want me to work on. And then I will decide whether I want to work on this person. I mean, if somebody calls me up and says, we're starting a brand new restaurant downtown and we're looking for somebody to design our menu. We're thinking of something with a nice leather-bound look and maybe a tassel. And do you do that sort of thing? And I'll say, yeah, that sounds interesting. He says, yes, I can do that sort of thing. I have sources that I can get the leather-bound and all that from. So yes, this is somebody I want to work with. Now, on the other hand, if somebody calls me up and says, we're opening up a restaurant downtown and we're looking for somebody to do menus. Do you do menus? And I say, yes, I do menus. And they respond, great. How cheap are they? Or how cheap can you do them? Well, right there, that's a red flag. I immediately think to myself, I don't want to work with these people. If the first question out of their mouth is, how cheap can I do the job? Then they're not the client I want to work with, because I know there's going to be problems down the road with them, because even once I give them a price, they're going to probably dicker with that and want it for cheaper, or they're going to try to get other stuff out of me, and it's just not worth the headache. So the initial conversation is to kind of weed out which people you want to start moving forward with and which you want to just say right off the bat, no, thank you. I'm not able to take on that project right now. Now, once you get that out of the way and you decide, okay, this project sounds interesting. These people sound good. I'd like to work with them. The next step would be, you mentioned a questionnaire. I don't have a questionnaire per se that I go through. Some designers actually do. Some designers pull out a questionnaire and they have 20 questions that they would ask or more, 30 questions, whatever. They would go through one by one in that. I don't do that. What I like to do is I have a conversation. And sometimes this will be the initial phone call. Once I decide I want to work with them, then we'll just keep talking and then I'll go through this pre-discovery is the way I like to call it. And that's where I'm going to ask some questions, but I don't have an actual questionnaire. Now, sometimes I will actually tell the person, yes, we'd like to do this. Let's arrange a call or let's arrange a meeting where we can get together and discuss some things. And during this, what I want to do is want to find out kind of the scope of the job. I'm not going into individual details, but I want to find out the scope of the job. Are they looking for a menu? How many pages on the menu? What sort of items are they have? Do they want logos for, like, say they offer a bunch of soft drinks, Pepsi, Coke, or whatever? No, they wouldn't offer both Pepsi and Coke. Anyways, besides that, whatever soft drink. Do they want just saying that they offer soft drinks? Do they want the actual Pepsi logo, the 7-Up logo, and whatever? And I don't know if Pepsi and 7-Up are the same. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. But do they want the various logos for the brands? Do they want the menus laminated? Do they want a special paper? Do they want, there's other things you're going to have to find out. What sort of place is this? Is it a fast food joint? Is it a high-class restaurant? Do they have a bar? What's the lighting in there? That's something very important that you got to take into consideration. These are all little things I like to ask up front just to get a feel for what this project's going to be. Now, these questions, as I said, I like to ask them verbally. I don't like sending an email because verbally, you can kind of pick up on the cues that people say as they say stuff or as they answer. And sometimes their answer will branch off into another question for you. If they say something, then maybe you'll think, oh, well, that makes me think of something else. And then you'll think of another question. So that's why I don't like the questionnaire form where you have 20 questions or whatever to ask, because you never know during the conversation what other questions will come up. So I usually have that. And as I said, this is kind of the pre-discovery where I talk to them. And this might take 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the project. If it's a big project, it could take a while. Now, once that's done and I'm comfortable, then what I'll do is I'll put together a proposal. Now, I've got an idea of how much work is involved by that initial conversation. Now, there's still little details that still have to be worked out, but I will put out a general proposal. And at that point, they look at my price because the proposal will offer a price. And I will say, this is based on what we've talked about. It's subject to change depending on the full scope. And they'll look at the proposal and then they will decide whether they want to go forward with me or not. At this point, the client may say, oh, this is a lot more expensive than we thought. Thank you very much, but we're going to go find another way. And that's it. We're done. And yes, I wasted a little bit of time, but at least we're not going forward with a project we're both not going to be happy with. Now, if the client looks at the proposal and says, yes, I like this, this is good, then we go into what I call full discovery, where I go in and I start talking about everything and asking them questions as small as detail about anything that would come up with the project. If they want a tassel on their menu, what type of tassel? Do they want it to be like a gold tassel, a red tassel? How long do they want the tassel to be? Do they want it made out of wool? Do they want it out of plastic? Whatever. All sorts of little questions about the design of the menu, about the design of the restaurant. What are the colors in the restaurant? What are the waiters and waitresses wearing? What type of food do you serve? How is the food presented? There's so many questions to ask. And once we get all that stuff out of the way, also there's going to be some other stuff involved here where want to know where the restaurant is located, where their competition is, what's the closest similar type restaurant to them. There's a lot of stuff to find out. Once this stuff is done and I know exactly what is involved with the job, then I will issue them my contract. Now, some people will do this different. Some people won't do this stage until after the contract. I like putting the contract out after this because it's not until this stage that I know the full scope of the job. And then I can go back to the client and say, listen, I gave you the initial proposal. The proposal's good. I was accurate there. We're going to go ahead. Or listen, I gave you a proposal for this, but now you're asking for all this extra stuff. If you want to go forth, here's my contract, but we're adding this, so the price is going to change. And at that point, once we get the signed contract, then things are on the way and the job gets started. Now, you mentioned mood boards, and I find that kind of funny. You know what? I've been in this business for anyways, it's been over 25 years. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I first heard the term mood board. And I don't use it. I've never used that term other than talking in the podcast and that. I just, whenever I'm doing something like, again, let's use the menu as an example. I will go through and I will pick fonts. I will go through my font library and pick out maybe 2, 3, 6, a dozen fonts that I want to try for the menu. And I will try them in different combinations. Usually it would be 2 different fonts for a menu. And I would try them in different combinations until I find something that I am comfortable with. Most people would use a mood board to throw a few fonts on there and maybe a few colors, a few things, and then show it to the client to see what they think. I don't work that way. I don't show the client a bunch of things like that. I would use a mood board just for myself. And again, I don't call it a mood board, but I would use it to figure out the different fonts that I want to try the different patterns, the different textures, the different design styles that I want to try. And once I narrow it down, then I would come up with a proof to show the client. Maybe I'll come up with 2 different proofs or 3 different proofs. But again, it's not a mood board per se, because a mood board is showing them a bunch of different things, like different design styles that are not necessarily their menu, but maybe you could show them, well, here's this menu, or here's this thing from some other place, and here's these colors. What do you like? I've never worked that way, but some people swear by it. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different people work differently, and I don't work that way. But once I have maybe 1 or 2 proofs ready, and I like to show maybe 2 different font styles. So I'll show the same page on the menu. I'll do 1 page and I'll do 1 layout, and then I'll do the same page in a separate layout with different fonts, and maybe they change the layout of the page and whatever graphic elements might have to be on there. And then I'll show both of them to the clients and say, do you like A or do you like B? And they'll give me their opinion. And then whichever one they choose, that's the one we go with. And I design the rest of the menu. And we go through proofs and revisions. Now, again, revisions, that's something I have never put a limit on revisions. I'm of the mind that the client better get it the way they want it if they're going to be happy, because this podcast episode was talking about referrals. If the client's not happy with the job, they're not going to refer you to anybody else. So I'm not going to limit them and say you're only allowed 2 revisions or 3 revisions and that's it. Some people do that. I have never limited the number of revisions. I usually have enough leeway in my pricing to cover revisions, several revisions. If there's no revisions on the job at all, then I just make more money on the job. But I've always covered myself that way. And on certain projects that I bill by the hour, if I happen to be billing by the hour on it, then by all means, give me as many revisions as you want. I don't care. It just keeps the clock ticking. And the more time I spend on the job, the more money I make on it. So once the proofs go out, the revisions and everything is finalized and the job is done, then I will give the files, the final files to the client according to the contract, whatever files they wanted, whatever they needed. If I'm print brokering the job, I will deal with the printer and I will take care of that. And the client will get the final, in this case, the final menu delivered to them. And that's the way I work. Now, on a physical product like a menu or a t-shirt or a brochure or a poster, I would invoice and then ask to be paid within 30 days. On digital projects, like if I'm working on a website or on a banner ad for a digital, like online or anything digitally, in those cases, I would ask to be paid upon completion before I hand over the files. Because when somebody gets something physical, if you deliver a bunch of t-shirts or if you deliver menus or posters, they have something physical. They know they just got a good from you or goods from you. They need to pay you for it. But for some reason, some clients have the mentality that because you're giving them a web banner that isn't really solid, it's pixels on a screen, they sometimes will think, well, you know what? I don't really need this, but it didn't really cost you anything to make it, or I'm not going to pay. And it's just a mentality that some people have, which I don't understand. It still took you time to do it. But when people can hold something in their hands, then that's when they would say, well, I've got this, even if it's something I'm not going to use. Like say you design a poster for an event and then the event gets canceled. Well, if the client has the posters in hand, whether the event was canceled or not, they know they have to pay for these posters. But if you did a web banner for them and the event got canceled, they might say, well, you know what? There's nothing tangible there. Maybe I'll try not to pay for this job. So anytime that it's something intangible that they can't hold, I demand payment upon delivery. So a website, you have to pay me in full before the website goes live. A web banner, before I hand it over to you in the final form, I have to accept payment beforehand, and that's And that's basically my project, Sully. I probably went into a little bit more detail there than I should have, but I hope that answers your question. And I do wish you all the best with your business, the way you go forth. And as I said, there's no right or wrong way to do this, only the way that works for you. Now, with Sully's question, I do believe that's the last question I had in my mailbag. If you sent me a question and I have not answered it on the podcast, first of all, I apologize. But if that's the case, please resend your question. I had some problems a couple of months ago with my email, and I lost a bunch of things. That's when I had to reinstall. I erased my computer and reinstalled stuff. I ended up losing a bunch of things. So it's possible that I did get some questions that were never answered, that they're just gone. So if I never answered your question, please resubmit it and I will get to it as soon as possible. And if you haven't sent a question, but you think of something, please send it. Visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback to submit your question. And I will get to it on a future episode of the podcast. As I said, I believe, I'll have to double check, but I believe Sully's question is the last one I had in my mailbag. So I don't have any question for next episode. So if you submit something soon enough, I'll be able to answer it pretty quick. So I look forward to hearing from you. Now, I'd like to share my latest iTunes review with you. And this one came in from Nicoletta from the Netherlands. This is one of the most helpful graphic design podcasts out there. I discovered Mark's podcast a little over a month ago, and I've almost listened to all the episodes. That's how much I like it. It's full of actionable advice, useful tips, and tricks from someone who's been in the business for a long time. Mark, thanks for the effort you're making to share your experience with us, and looking forward to more episodes. Well, thank you very much for that, Nicoletta. My very first review from the Netherlands. I love getting these reviews from all over the world. I mentioned a few episodes ago how I've been receiving reviews from different countries, but there's over 150 different countries that have an iTunes store that you can leave a review on. And I would love to get as many of those countries as possible. So Nicoletta just sent my very first one from the Netherlands, and I'm very grateful for that. But I would love to get more from all over the globe. So if you would like to leave a review for a Resourceful Designer, please head over to resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you to my podcast page in your country where you can leave a review. So thank you once again. Now, before I go, I just want to share, I don't usually share my social media stuff. It's something I don't do often enough. I have mentioned in recent episodes the Facebook group, which is growing strong. We have a great community in there, which you can get to by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/group, and that'll redirect you to the page where you can join the group. We've had some great conversations. Lately, I asked people what was their go-to font. The type of thing is when you're in doubt and you're not sure, what font is the first font you go to? And there was some great answers in there from people recommending fonts that I had never heard of, and I was checking them out, and some wonderful, amazing fonts that I learned about. And there's been some other great conversations in the group. So if that's something that interests you, please join. I would love to have you. Now, as for other social media, I do have a Facebook page at facebook.com/resourcefuldesigner. I am on Twitter at resourcefulD. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned it before, but I do have a Pinterest page, but all I do there is really publish the episodes, which if you are on Pinterest and you would like to share or pin or whatever you do there, the episodes as I put them out, it would be greatly appreciated. And you can reach me there on pinterest.com/resourcefulD. So that's it for this episode. I look forward to talking to you next week and whatever topic. I haven't decided the topic yet, but whatever it is, I'll have fun talking to you about it. Until then, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best in your graphic design business. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.